An intriguing account of multiple contacts with a Nordic-type alien entity came out of Birmingham, England in 1957, involving a stay-at-home wife and mother named Cynthia Appleton. Of the many investigators who interviewed her, all were struck by her sincerity and intelligence. She described her first visitation as the sudden appearance of the figure of a tall, fair man who made a sweeping lateral gesture with both of his hands. In her words, there appeared between his outstretched fingers what she could only describe as a television, the so-called spaceman, what may have been a three-dimensional hologram. The first report of Cynthia Appleton's claimed encounters was made by the British magazine Flying Saucer Review, based on an account by the Reverend William Cartmel, rector of Aldridge, Staffordshire, who had personally interviewed the experiencer. The article stated that twice in 6 weeks, 27-year-old Mrs. Cynthia Appleton of Fentham Road, Aston, Birmingham, England, claimed to have been visited by men from another planet. The very strange sequence of events began on Monday, November 18th at 3 p.m, when Cynthia put her 3-year-old daughter Susan to bed for a nap upstairs. Her baby Janet was in a pram in the front room downstairs and, thinking that she heard a cry, Cynthia went down to check on her. She later related that she was suddenly conscious of a very real feeling of oppressiveness in the air, describing it as similar to what's experienced just before thunder. When Cynthia looked out of the window, a rosy-coloured darkness manifested outside. This was when suddenly there appeared the figure of the man standing on her left next to the fireplace. She related that he appeared just like a TV picture on the screen as a blurred image, and then suddenly everything became clear. She was naturally very frightened, but also aware that he was calming her by some form of influence that he was exerting upon her mind, after which she felt quite calm and collected. She also noticed, at the moment of his appearance, a kind of electronic whistle, exactly like old wireless sets made when tuning into a station. The tall, fair man was wearing a tight-fitting one-piece suit in a silvery metallic colour, with long sleeves and its collar rising up behind his head in a kind of Elizabethan style. Cynthia described the being as having elongated and angular features, a fair complexion, white blonde hair, and initially wearing a bowl over his head, which was not present on subsequent visits. His lips were moving as if in speech, but she heard no audible words, and he seemed able to read her mind, mentally answering her questions. His first words were delivered in a flat monotone: "Do not be afraid." Cynthia sensed that the stranger had somehow assumed hypnotic control of her. On the floor there was some newspaper on which the man was standing, and after he left, she noticed that it appeared to be scorched. It was later removed by a reporter from the Birmingham Evening Gazette. In reply to her unspoken question, "Where do you come from?" he answered, "From another world," and continued, "Like yours, it is governed by the sun. We have to visit your world to obtain something of which we are running short, which is at the bottom of your sea." Cynthia recalled the substance as titium, but when her husband, a metal worker, returned that night, he speculated that it was actually titanium. On the being's screen, she could clearly see a spaceship, which was circular, with the top half like a transparent dome, through which she could see several figures looking at her. Some smaller craft were attached to the underpart of the mothership, or what he called the mastercraft. These images were something Cynthia had never in her life seen before, and her latest sketch depicted a dome on top of a rotating rim with 3 hemispherical bumps on the underside, details that seemed to recur in sightings by other UFO witnesses. The visitor told Cynthia that his people never fought but lived in peace and harmony, and that open contact with humanity was not possible due to wars. Suddenly he was no longer there, and she wept in shock and fear for half an hour. However, after this first contact, she says she felt a remarkably increased sense of awareness of other people. An intriguing detail is that her baby Janet, whose first birthday was on the day before, had at that time 1 tooth. By the end of the week, she had 6. Cynthia was no attention seeker and told only a few people about her experience, having no desire for publicity. However, the local newspaper heard about her claim and published a story. Her second contact took place on Tuesday, January 7th. She again heard the electronic whistle, and suddenly there appeared in front of her not one but 2 figures in exactly the same manner as in her previous visitation. A blurred image, after which suddenly everything came into sharp focus. She recognised her first visitor as one of the beings, but both looked very similar. Unlike the telepathic communication of her first encounter, surprisingly on this occasion they both addressed her in English. She was first informed that a blackout she had had the previous evening was entirely due to their own actions in preparing to make contact with her again. In this encounter, the other seemingly senior extraterrestrial mainly questioned Cynthia about the results of her previous encounter, asking whom she had told about it. He told her, somewhat unbelievably, that they came from Garnasvan, a country on Venus, and that they appeared to her and not others because her brain was one of the few who were capable of receiving such communications. Cynthia asked if it was possible for her to touch him, but he said that this would be very dangerous to her physical health, as she was seeing a projection of himself and his companion. When asked why they did not seek wider contacts with the human race, he replied that such an immediate action might cause panic. A surprising disclosure was that those they called the bearers of the hammer and sickle, obviously Russia, was on the point of perfecting a ray gun which could disintegrate matter without firing any shell like ordinary artillery. He also told her that in the near future there would be much bloodshed and suffering. With the implication that the aliens had assisted in the discovery of the soon-to-be-announced practical lasers, one asks why a peaceful species would assist in developing weapons of war. Cynthia, when later questioned, said she did not feel frightened as on the first visit. She stated that she had never previously been interested in flying saucers and had not read any books or literature upon the subject. Eventually, in total, her reported contacts with these entities numbered 7. Exactly 1 month later, February 7th, 1958, she opened her front door in response to its ring, where stood a man in a navy blue Homburg hat and dark fawn overcoat. He said, "I have been here before," and on being admitted, the strange man removed his hat to reveal long blonde hair and his overcoat to show his metallic suit underneath. She said that he spoke in an odd, archaic style of English. This 2-hour visit became his longest, wherein he said he needed help in treating a burn on his hand. Cynthia helped him, after which he brought out an object resembling a pencil flashlight, inside which he placed a treatment capsule. During this incident, Cynthia touched his suit several times, finding it like extremely slimy elastic and horrible to the touch. The process of healing his burn was witnessed by Cynthia's 4-year-old daughter Susan, who told the People journalist Patrick Kent that she remembered her mother bathing the hand of a man with, quote, funny long hair and a fur collar. Of the 7 ET visits experienced by Cynthia during 1958, all but the first 2 saw her visitors turning up by car wearing black business suits, occasionally accompanied by her initial November contact. The final visit is said to have been about the middle of September 1958, when the visitor approached Cynthia's back door in suit attire while she was doing the washing. He reportedly raised his black Homburg hat and informed her that she was in the state of being with child. They talked for 20 minutes, during which time he said the child would be a boy weighing 7 pounds 3 ounces and with fair hair, and that he would be born late in May 1959 and become a leader of men at the age of 14. It was stipulated that he must be called Matthew. Cynthia didn't believe herself to be pregnant, but promptly attended her doctor, who confirmed she was, and that conception would have taken place only a few days before. The prediction of the baby's details was reported by journalist Patrick Kent in a derogatory article in the People edition of May 5, 1959. He also quoted Cynthia as saying, "I'm going to have the world's first space child," and that while her husband was the baby's father, in actuality the child would belong to a race living on the planet Venus, what was considered a popular term for their stated origin of Garnasvan. Cynthia's baby was born with fair hair and blue eyes, like his mother, but more striking was the boy's weight of just 1 ounce over the prediction, and his birth date of June 1st, rather than the predicted late May. At 2 weeks of age, Cynthia was describing baby Matthew as having the delicate features of his spiritual race. However, in a follow-up newspaper article, when Matthew Appleton was 13 months old, she was expressing puzzlement that there appeared nothing special about him at all, and that her regular visitor had never returned. After some years, the family seemed to slip off the media radar, and right up until the early 2000s, researchers have been unable to track down any of its members, certainly not a 14-year-old Matthew Appleton in 1973, standing out as a potential leader of men. The only remaining evidence of these strange visits was a piece of the being's skin found by Cynthia after his burn treatment. It was examined by both Manchester and Birmingham universities and found not to be human, but is now lost to time. Another was the seemingly extensive scientific information provided to Cynthia by her visitors that she would have had no way of knowing. This included the presence of 3 particles in the nucleus, while human scientists of the day believed it was 1. It was a few years later, in 1965, that physicist Murray Gell-Mann proposed the existence of 3 different hypothetical particles known as quarks, which were later confirmed by experimental work in the 1970s.